Welcome. My name is Wendi Norris, and we're here tonight in uncovering Alice Rahon, an art exhibition here in San Francisco. I am going to take a few minutes before we turn it over to the reading just to give you guys a sense of who Alice Rahon was as both a poet and a painter. One of the most important things I think to remember about Alice Rahon is that she was striving for what André Breton called the marvelous, which was this perfect union of the poetic image and the visual image. So for me, it's important to understand that Rahon started as a poet. She was one of the very few official women in the surrealist movement, and her very first volume of poetry was published by André Breton. And she spent in the 1930s, she wrote all of her poetry from France, which was her native country, or India, where she traveled periodically with Valentine Penrose. And then in 1939, at the invitation originally of Frida Kahlo, her husband at the time, Wolfgang Paalen, and their dear friend and patron, Eva Sulzer, the three of them traveled, left, and migrated from war-torn Europe like many artists and thinkers of the time, and they ended up traveling here in North America through the Northwest coast, down through the Bay Area, before they headed up and ended up in Mexico, where they lived out the rest of their lives. So from 1939 onwards, that's when she picked up her first paintbrush. Presumably it was her husband's, and started painting, and she never wrote a poem after that. So it was interesting today, I was talking to some curators who were in town, and they said, oh, well, I didn't know she did natural things and was interested in birds. And I'm like, well, you haven't read her poetry yet. So for me, it's really interesting that 1 or 2 or 3 decades later, she revisits a lot of the work in her paintings in a visual language that she once wrote a poem about. So I think it's really, it's almost critical to learn about her work through her poetry as well. So about, 4 or 5 years ago, I embarked on this journey about Alice Rahon, and the most interesting thing, and one of the reasons why we call it Uncovering Alice Rahon, is not just because of the surface of her paintings, which are like really, some of them are super built up, as you can see, with sand and pulverized volcanic ash, the actual land of Mexico, which ultimately became her naturalized place of birth. So she reveals the surface by the sgraffito technique. She's scratching away to reveal these paintings. And that's where we get the uncovering. But for us as a journey, there was a collective group of art historians and scholars, the gallery, and also some literary buffs who together in the last 3 to 5 years, we called it our COVID project, really started studying her. And the gallery published her first monograph. It's available at the front desk, and that there's 2 scholars from Mexico City, Tere Arc and Daniel Garza-Usabiaga, who talk quite a bit about how Rahon was so influenced by Mexico. I mean, you can kind of feel it. You're sitting in the middle of the earth, this Mexican earth. But she was also, in turn, very much influential in Mexican modern and contemporary art. Artists like Dr. Atl, Rufino Tamayo, Francisco Toledo, all were her friends, all were mentored by her throughout time, but people didn't know about her. I mean, San Francisco Museum of Art, now our SF MoMA, gave her 2 solo shows while she was alive. She ended up spending the last decade of her life in relative solitude and died peacefully in Mexico City. So to me, this uncovering of who this artist was, what her life was all about, was quite fascinating. And then we're year 3 or 4 into this, and I realized that the New York Review of Books is also year 3 or 4 into her literary work, and they were going to publish her first ever entire oeuvre, both in French and in the original translated English of her poetry, which is why we're here tonight. So this book that's at the front desk called Shapeshifter also includes never before published poems, one specifically about her lover, Pablo Picasso, one of her lovers. So that's pretty exciting if you want to read that. I think that together with Ann Caws, who translated and published this book, I mean, I don't know if you know who Ann Caws is, but she's written like 47 books and pretty much a legend. She couldn't be here tonight, but we're going to hear from her. So I think it's a really wonderful tribute to Rahon, and I get emotional. I'm not supposed to be emotional. Anyway, thank you. And Sid, Small Press Traffic. These guys have been around since 1974, and they really are all about like the interdisciplinary artists, like Rahon, and those that are today's Rahons. And so it was very fitting that Sid and your team co-curated or co-hosted this event and curated tonight's reading, and I'm really happy to turn it over to you now. Thank you, Sid.
Thank you so much, Wendy, and all of Wendy's team, Erin and everyone else, and my team, Madeline and Claudia, and other folks who have helped make this happen. Like Wendy said, we are an organization that's been around small press traffic for almost 50 years, just around the corner. And we are a poetry organization, but we do a lot of programs, especially in the last few years, looking at poets and other artists who work in other forms. And so some of the programs that'll come up later in the fall include one at Artist Television Access in the Mission with films and poetry. Another one in November will be at Catherine Clark Gallery with Amy Trachtenberg's show. There you are, thank you. And in December, at the Lab, reading guest curated by Violet Spurlock. We're also about to launch our brand new website just in a few weeks, and including our brand new publishing project called The Back Room, which will include, thank you, yes, art writing in the Bay Area and beyond, led by Claudia LaRocco, former editorial director of SF MoMA's Open Space. And coming up in the fall, once we launch that, I cannot wait, we will have two writers reflecting on this show and event, Tausif Noor and Ann Walsh. So look out for that. Look out for us out there where you look for things, and we'll be there. So this event, I was thrilled to hear from Wendy in thinking about how to bring poetry into this space and bringing especially Alice Rahon's poetry into the space. And as she said, and Ann Caws unfortunately could not be here in person, but we have a video of her reading from the book that she herself translated. She'll be reading in both English and French. She will read for we're going to show about 6 minutes at the beginning and about 4 minutes at the end of some of the poems out of the book that's available here. And then between that, we'll have 3 local readers. We'll start with Cole Solinger, who's a writer, a poet, and a gallerist, founder of Delaplane Gallery, and is working on a new gallery that'll be around pretty soon. Layla Forrest-White, who is a Latin teacher, a writer, PhD in comparative literature. Thank you. I was like, yeah, comparative literature from UC Berkeley, and a lover of Proust, which, you know what, I was just like wanting to get to the Proust so bad, because I'm a lover of Proust, that I just forgot that whole complet thing. And we'll conclude with Yedda Morrison, who is a poet, writer, visual artist, and prop stylist, and a lot of these folks have books in the back for sale or for taking. She has a gorgeous book. Pam Martin is also in that book. It's a collection of 4 artists' books that were published recently by Kripskaya Press that's available for sale there. And Yedda, just gorgeous work if you visit her website or Instagram and see the incredible visual art and styling, interior styling that she does. So I'm going to get out of your way, and we're going to start with the program. We'll start with Ann Caws. Thanks for coming.
So this is about Alice Paalen Rahon, who was a shapeshifter in every single possible way you can imagine. First of all, she shifted where she was born. She said she was born in Brittany. She was not, but she vacationed there. And so the Celtic myths keep coming up. Then she shifted her date of birth. So she was older than she said she was. And she shifted a lot of other things. She shifted her nationality because she was really French. Then she became Mexican. And she shifted her careers all the time. She was a poet and then a painter and then a hat maker and then a sculptor of wire sculptures. And I'll read you one of those about Orion. And then she was a shifter of partners, a very big shift of partners. First, she was with the Austrian painter Wolfgang Paalen, and I'll be reading you 2 poems about him and for him. And then she had a very passionate love affair with Picasso. Few women didn't, but she did too. And then she was going to stay with him, but Paalen said, okay, I'll commit suicide if you stay with him. So she went back to him, and then after 2 more marriages, he committed suicide anyway. So at that point, when she got divorced from him, she then took her mother's maiden name, which was Rahon. Kind of interesting to take your mother's maiden name, I think. And then she had already traveled with Paalen to Altamira, those 10,000 years old ancient caves. And from those, she took a lot of earth that she put in her paintings, and she also scraped the paint off Wolfgang Paalen's palette and put it in her paintings, and then she put string and other things in there, sand. And then she was with the cinematographer Edward Fitzgerald. That didn't last very long either. They made a film together. The film got lost. And then she ended up her life alone with many cats. And she was probably the most poetic person I've ever dealt with. And I want to salute her poetry, which is what I'm doing here. And I should tell you that in this book that I'll be reading from, there's no other place to get the French. It's impossible to get the French anywhere. So it's not only bilingual, but I'll be reading you the French because it's really important. And the first poems are from a book called À même la terre, meaning lying on the bare earth. She was thinking about the immigrants lying on the bare earth. And these are poems which Breton saluted not as poetry, but as a talisman for surrealism itself. She was very surrealist. They don't have titles. In the night of the beginning, fog left its blood between salty lips, beyond the eyes of the sun. Dans la nuit du commencement, le brouillard laissa son sang entre les lèvres salées, au-delà des yeux du soleil. I file down invisible bars. I snort like a horse. I swaddle swaddling clothes. I offer hearts and hands. I turn my head towards me. I see branches like birds, their faces white towards the sky. I sound unknown hours. I arrive without leaving. I loose the strings. I sleep on my hair. I don't look back. My eyes don't obey. My body doesn't obey. My hands, these strangers, I count the furrows in the straw until they turn gold. Je lime des barreaux invisibles. Je souffle comme les chevaux. J'enveloppe ces langes. J'offre des cœurs et des mains. Je tourne la tête vers moi. Je vois les branches comme les oiseaux. Leur face est blanche vers le ciel. Je sonne des heures inconnues. J'arrive sans partir. Je tiens, je lâche les fils. Je dors sur mes cheveux. Je ne regarde pas en arrière. Mes yeux n'obéissent pas. Mon cœur n'obéit pas. Mes mains, ces étrangères. Je compte les sillons dans la paille jusqu'à ce que l'or s'en suive. This is from a very rare book called Le Sablier Couché. I could only find very few copies in the universe, and I had to buy one at an extraordinary price. Reclining Hourglass. It's called Le Sablier Couché, the whole little book, 4 poems. No sleeping wind shall carry my head. No hand with the imprint of my cheek, no arm will hold me. At the open window, your arm is alone. You could not exist between this sun and this window at the insult of springtime. There you are, laced and knotted, no end of strings and knots of your own mute canvas. The woman deserted like a house sold, netted without a sound in swaddling clothes. Her mouth's drinks quenches no language at length in vain. All roads lost before birth. The dove, its dress worn out by captivity in the wicker basket at the window. Your foliage was not yet born. The blackbird of twilights at dawn, I cannot hear your voice that closes eyes and doors that has drunk my heart. Sablier couché. Nul vent normand ne portera ma tête, nulle main à l'empreinte de ma joue, nul bras ne me tiendra. À la croisée ouverte, ton bras est seul. Tu n'as pu exister entre ce soleil et cette croisée à l'injure du printemps. Te voilà lassé et noué, sans fin de fil et de nœuds de ta propre toile muette. La femme déserte comme la maison vendue, prise au filet sans bruit de l'ange. Sa bouche n'abreuve aucun langage, longue veine, niée par les veines, toute route perdue avant de naître. La colombe à la robe usée de captivité en cage d'osier à la fenêtre. Tes feuillages ne sont pas nés, le merle oiseau des crépuscules. Je ne peux à l'aube écouter ta voix qui ferme les portes et les yeux, qui a bu mon cœur.
Hi. There's a lot of people back there. Can everybody hear me? Is that okay? Okay. I'm Cole Solinger. Yeah, thank you for coming out. Round of applause for Wendy and SPT and everybody who's here. This is really fantastic. It's been a really long time since I've read my own poems, so I'm really, really fucking nervous. But that's okay. This was written during COVID, after COVID, and I know that there's been like a lot of that, but it's my turn to read mine. So it was good for all of us. Yeah, this is called Creation Myth. It's pretty long. It's just one poem. In the beginning, there was no design, only collision, and nature's ceaseless experiment in pursuit of a single truth. Our quiet gleaming box took stain from the wood. Splinters ripened, then rot. Sun poured in. Smoothed by the thumb of some cultish god, hungry for our minerality, we became a busy people. Brass polished by the hand of sin. I've always wanted to drop paper on the floor after reading, so I'm doing that today too. Stories echoed in adolescent tones grew visual. Tarred digits following the curve of memory. Fire-lit mammalian scrolls. Canticle, friction, caress. A crane fly mistakes something for the moon. Time leaves to quiver at the dawning edge. Dear Jim, it's 5:15 a.m., benevolent Saturn sequestered to the void before me. The hours turn despite my ransom. Truth is a bright fish bent to reap another day. It has just begun to rain. Can you see the fire? The new, the green unabashed. Who I remind you of, even how. Symphonic with deceit in the pale of an American view, time tolerates our course corrections. Medical lights, strobes, a new room sanitized. Diodes pantomime an 800-mile derecho. Cattle set about their flea. Patients of incurable loss graze the wheel of resurrection. Rain, interruption, the tidy music of consequence. The shadowed effigy olfactory of space. An acrimonious sore. The linen of Tutankhamun, an old egg. A stone seen from all sides. The alterations of heaven. A glass of clear water. An aura of factuality. Some novel fusion. A vista one is not ready for. At that moment of discernment under the shadow of our Creator, are we compelled to sing? At intimacy revolted from misgiving, at a bare spot of earth, at technology's proprietary right to the future, its constant affront to God, the transportation of minerals, the clarity of liquid crystal, this is just a big list now of things that I think about. The interception of light, the christening of ships, the angled plate by which to strike, the breathing body, the present destroying air, the remains of antiquity, the mandibles of corn gall, the lunar circuit, the privacy of pain, the demons, the pre-dressing, the therapy, the erasure, the gas-fed fire, the Hebrew for blanket, the years on your back, salt, linen, ichor, equinox, violence, the hinterland, the breath within a sound, corruption, daylight, sibilance, water through a drain, the smell of starch, lamp black solar plexus, the admission of psychosis, the Eucharist dance, divinity, placement, the lingering spell, your first taste of wine, your first taste of flesh, the energy return, the exhausted crown, the curse of the living, the release of the dead, the glint in the eyes of God as the stars haze you out tonally. Thank you.
Hi. Well, thank you. Thank you so much to the gallery for having me tonight, and also thank you very much, Sid, for asking me to do this. This is actually my very first time reading something that I've written that's not academic, so be gentle. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. This is a poem that I wrote for my friend Adam, and it's called Here in the Tomb Room. Like drugs blooming in the blood, blossoming and flowering, unfurling their chemical phantasmagoria of petals, metallic vapors seeping from our flesh thurible, wafting up to the rafters, the joke spirits in, dissolving itself into a fine mesh for catching any infidels who might blaspheme, like, is this even a church? Silence, moron. Behold. There were these people once who wrote in vertical ideograms. Twist of reed, snake, owl, ripple of water, lasso, hillside, quail chick, hand, horned viper, fold of cloth. They took bodies possessing no image, no thought or form of reference in language, but enough strength in spine and a vertiginous chance at an afterlife, and with them, they drilled the earth. Oh shit, did they drill it. Pull from the depths granadiorite, now fashion it into a massive figure of a woman with a lion head. That's pestilence, that's Sekhmet. You assholes, you better be fucking spooked. Just look at that thing you built. Query the limestone, you remedial slags. Now do it 5 million more times. And fuck you, I've never heard of wheels. What the fuck's a wheel? What? What? That's what I thought. Listen up, peasants. Me and my harem are going in here to die. You better have got it so that rays of light bounce off my solid gold sarcophagus in my burial chamber on my birthday, and my birthday only. Exactly like I said, or so help me Ra, you are all so fucked. Your children's children, all fucked. The Sphinx looks east toward the rising sun. Equinoctial desert Penelope, guardian of a handful of dead and their assembled treasures. 3 things will last forever: that this is funny, that this is sad, that this is true. And the greatest of these places a wafer on the tongue, smudges the forehead, hands the chalice, bends the hair into the pool. Catechisms of laughter. Shh, she's here, our holy. And so this is actually not a poem, but I wanted to read an excerpt from a work in progress of something that I'm writing with my beloved interlocutor, Claire Grossman. And yeah. And so we haven't finished this yet. And so this is just a taste of it, which is a pun, as you'll see in a moment. And this is called either Apocalypse 4800 or White Mountain. We're not sure yet. Have you, like Stefan Zweig's Christine, getting her hair cut in a salon in the Swiss Alps, ever experienced something so exquisite on vacation that the prospect of returning to civilian life demands that you either blow up a post office or die with your lover Ferdinand? If you have, perhaps you've eaten a Monte Bianco in Rome. It was a sultry 38 degrees or so. Sorry, we're not sure what that is in American measurements. When we set out to walk for an hour to I Buoni Amici, near the Esquiline Hill from where we were in Trastevere. The route took us past the Forum and Colosseum, but by then we were slightly exhausted with the daily beholding of marvels of the Western world in sweltering heat with teeming crowds all dripping gelati. Just that morning, or maybe a different morning, it had been pointed out to us that the bas-reliefs on the office buildings in Mussolini's new version of the Piazza Augusto Imperatore depicted helmets, gas masks, Uzis, maybe, and ammunition magazines like stalks of wheat. Our eyes were tired. Dinner was a rowdy, possibly bawdy affair. All older women classicists, and us, one of whom is a middle-aged classicist, if life be 72 years. They were all in town for the memorial service of a beloved Carmelite priest and Vatican Latinist, maybe the foremost Latinist in the world, according to the Times, who taught at the Gregorian. One of us doesn't drink, but one of us really does. Eventually, a most mysterious plate arrived on the table after the drinking one of us had gestured to the plastic domed dessert cart and said, "Tutto." "What was that?" one of us asked, pointing to an empty plate bearing flecks of beige and white. The plate, at one point, held an almost indescribable thing on it. Whipped cream, to be sure, undergirded by some kind of puff pastry, maybe, and then what looked like a pile of medium brown hair. But like hair made of yarn, like Raggedy Andy's hair, but brown, sweet, and creamy. One of us asked a kindly waiter, and he said, "Oh, Monte Bianco." We Googled it furiously and came across nothing that seemed related to what we'd just eaten. We showed the waiter the phone in confusion. Okay, he said, Mont Blanc. And there it was, chestnut puree made into vermicelli. We gasped. It's unclear whether the Monte Bianco originated as such in Italy or as the Mont Blanc in France. No matter its national origin, it's clear that the dish visually references the giant mountain straddling the two countries through its only consistent ingredients: chestnut puree sieved or piped into some kind of noodle form for the mountain, and whipped cream for its snowy peak. One name given to this summer's weather in Europe is Apocalypse 4800, so called because that's the elevation at which to find thermal zero, or 0 degrees, a temperature which was previously found some 1,600 meters lower. 4,800 meters also happens to be almost the exact height of Mont Blanc. As Mont Blanc is the tallest mountain in the Alps, and thus Western Europe, it stands to reason that all the snow west of Vienna has melted. We did not know that the roof tiles of a museum in Chongqing would slide off upon the melting of their underlying tar, or that a column of ice would detach from an alpine glacier, or that wildfires in southwest Slovenia would set off hundreds of buried, unexploded bombs from World War I. We did not yet know that 2 prime ministers would resign, one concluding his speech with "Hasta la vista, baby," shortly before the Queen would die and the Indus River would flood. We did not know that crowds would storm the Sri Lankan presidential palace, where they would remark to news outlets on the air conditioning, even in the palace bathrooms, they said. The heat was extraordinary, like a thing of heretofore unencountered ontology, boiling our blood and brains. It conveyed in sweat an insight long lurking. History makes sport of us. Sumptuous, too, this heat, like asphyxiation by cake icing, though imprecise in feeling, as pentimento or a bird looking for something to light upon, and willful and high sheen, unheeding, like it would kiss you and confidently call you the wrong name, a lopsided silk bow, a shape-changing god, a faulty exploding gizmo in a cartoon. It was at once enervating and maddening, and all the riots that happened in the summer made sense in a new way. Sometimes you can get so hot that the incivility of having your neck under the boot of whatever boot your neck is under becomes intolerable, and you storm the palace. Quite a cliffhanger, I know. So if you would like to see that or read that when we're done with it, we have business cards out front. It's the dsnuts@aol.com address is the best place to reach us. And so I wanted to end with a poem that I wrote for my dad, who's here tonight. And it is actually his birthday a week from today. It's Claire's birthday on Wednesday. It's Eli's birthday a week from tomorrow. So I was hoping at the count of 3 we could all say happy birthday to them, please. Yeah? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday. Thank you. So this is a poem that I wrote for my dad, and it's actually pretty much, it's a condensed but verbatim record of a conversation that I had with him once. And it's called How Old Are You? How Young Am I? You know why I'm not a pessimist? I haven't turned my back on Marx. Not yet. Dialectics, baby. Reality is going to slap you in the face. And you know who my best fucking friend is? His name is Riala motherfucking T. Her name? You know what the fuck I'm doing out here? I'm playing 12-dimensional chess, sweetie. Yeah? Marxism? Fuck it. Marxists? Fuck 'em. This is the darkest time for the left, who should all rot in hell. This shit makes me want to drive an Uber and blow my fucking brains out. No, don't say that. But Marx? Never turn my back on Marx. All that shit, people want to be good, to do good. It's just easy to be evil. Hitler, Trump, it's fucking easy. You think so? You know that Martin Luther thought of the Reformation while fucking pooping or something? An entire denomination out of his butt. Well, oh hey, I forgot to tell you, and I should mention, this is not the aunt who's here tonight. This is a different aunt. I forgot to tell you, your aunt is a fucking sociopath. You may have mentioned it. Oh yeah, but the optimism. Why I'm an optimist with Marx. That hunt in the morning, be a poet at night shit. The German ideology. Nobody has one exclusive sphere of activity, but each can become accomplished in any branch he wishes. Society regulates the general production and thus makes it possible for me to do one thing today and another tomorrow, to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, herd in the evening, and criticize after dinner, just as I have a mind without ever becoming hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic. Thank you. Yeah. that was Mark's. Beautiful stuff. All right, sweetie, be productive. Don't get too down. These are dark times. But listen, if you remembered more of Reagan, fucking Ronnie, Jesus Christ, this wouldn't seem so bad. It feels pretty bad. I know it does. I just wish you guys had some kind of movement. I thought we really had something there with Hillary. See? Jokes. That's my daughter. Keep it up. I love you. I love you. Thank you.
All right, we're going to stay with the jokes, but we're going to take a hard tact into the domestic. So, thank you, Sid, and thank you, Wendy, so much for having us. I'm going to read a little bit from the arrangement. Yep, I sure can. And all you really need to know is that it centers on a character called the Decorator, who also goes by D. And playing a lesser role is D's client, who goes by Client. The history of objects is so sordid, the decorator can't even in the same room sometimes. It's before dawn and the decorator, wearing a buttercream house coat embroidered with electric blue lilies, is holed up in the narrow kitchen with the Chemex. Today, the decorator will introduce the client to the new home and the new home to the client, and this is delicate in the extreme. First and foremost, home must be palpable, and this is where D comes in, arriving early, throwing open the Dupioni silk drapes, banging on pillows. The art of home decor is both figurative and abstract, the body and the aspiration. At 9 a.m. sharp, the bell chimes like an absolute cathedral. So many stairs between the dressing room and foyer, the client will wait, taking the marble steps in an ephemeral silver tunic with matching trousers purchased for the occasion. The D knows this moment is everything, and as if the newly acquired residence is in fact D's own, and therefore wholly beyond reproach, D flings open the solid curve of the door, one perfectly manicured hand perched on the glistening hardware as if it had always been there. Come in, come in. D calculates the angle of the client's chin above the power necklace. Why must they hesitate? In the fizzy morning light, the entry is butterflies. A swelling symphony of iridescent pearls swarms the Mission Revival pink. Just inside the entry, strategically placed to draw the eye inward, D's statement briefcase winks seductively, and the client is in. After a quick but sweeping tour, D and client settle on an eggplant Augustine sectional and get to work. D manifests abundance and active wherewithal, suggests a palette of genteel gaiety by laying out a manageable array of warm whites. Things are casually in hand, then slowly, inching them in, the blushing, clingy florals, chirpy, self-sufficient stripes, cool greens like privacy, and the mind-bending blues with their capacious levitations. D's breath comes evenly now. A light but convincing touch, a casual looseness at the wrist, breezy flourishes with epic duration. Objects are nothing at all if they are not replicas of promise. Sourced, procured, and fussed over, they will slowly, slowly be unveiled. The client takes the afternoon, agreeing perhaps inevitably with D's various suggestions. The sea beyond the window solidifies the house. Nothing is such a triumph of luxury as empty space, expanse and containment, containment and expanse. Without knowing it even, the client expects a certain psychic buoyancy. There must be no jarring interchange between the client's body and the house. Everything has always already arrived, plentiful and in its place. The client will reach without looking. Okay, home is not for the weak-hearted. Every thought ends here. Ushering the client into the great room, Dee has serious doubts about the lacquered 10-foot sideboard, but there it is, lurching into focus, a glistening rectangle, ingeniously balancing the room against the vertical drop of the cliff beyond the picture window. The sideboard swells slightly, singing out. Dee passes into the study, heart rising up like a fist. The soothing effect of a brilliantly cloudless sky is at a slight angle to the oversized desk. A verdant bluff runs right up to the rug. Inky blue washes along the far wall, behind the towering bookcase, then curls into the ornate lion's head at the alabaster maw of the fireplace. It is here, on a low settee, that the magic and masochism really come together. Unless they don't. The house is an image that is lived, and by now it should be arcing out of a neoclassical jewel-toned landscape with crisp contemporary framing. But the space remains non-committal. The sea and sky are not bleeding out in a gray-blue ombre at the horizon line, nor offering counterpoint to the grand piano in the family for generations. An underdog is skulking in the chintzes. Long after the client leaves, Dee flops around the house, calculating through the client's eye value perception, squinting one and then the other, holding up the palm of each, tilting left and then tilting right. Dee collapses on the mohair love seat with that familiar post-client feeling, an aching disappointment with the ruling class. A deep, deft stillness settles like taffeta, panels close seamlessly with a little swoosh. Careful now. There is no definite point of orientation as the light reflecting off the water scurries up the walls. Domestic scenes are radial, not just a coveted rhinestone-encrusted skull held up by a faux leather cross, but a whole skeleton, perhaps, left out on the lawn. In the fading glow, objects grow orange and merciless, obtuse with melancholia, wobbly and omniscient, smug as false idols, temporally transcendent, culturally opportunistic, appropriative, and parasitic. That is, objectionable objects, saved up for and left. It's been years since a decorator regularly woke in a damp pool of inspiration, night after night, going rapid fire on a cross-stitch cushion cover. It's a wavy line of understated objects now as far as the eye can see. Sliding the tip of an abalone-handled letter opener under the lid, Dee brings the wrist up hard, snapping the seal. The master suite is awash in bioluminescence, seafoam walls set off a cloisonné vase from which drips a coral peony. This is the object. This is what the object sits on top of or under, in front of or behind. And this is all that is required on the stage of everything. In the early 90s, Dee had attended a convention of decorators, professional and otherwise. The What You Do When You Decorate seminar was ill-attended, but there were takeaways. Objects, regardless of value, are transitional. This is the existential and lived experience of topping from the bottom. Intimacy predicated on subservience. All in the breakout session had emphatically agreed, never not reading the room. Minimalism is curation with nothing to prove, and Dee has so much proving. Dee's natural state of horror vacui stands parenthetically opposed to value perception. It's true, Dee is a kinophobe, but there is safety in maximalism. No empty emotive corners, no open plains upon which feeling might unfurl. Just pattern upon pattern plunking its effusive largesse down on the civilized seating carefully arranged to contemplate the shifting light. It's with colossal effort that Dee turns the volume all the way down on the damask and cabbage roses, wrestling the lusty aim of every inch to be fully and wholly adorned. In a shared and essential abuse, Dee beats the underdog again and again. You could be more than halfway home and still expire with loneliness. Thank you.
Before we do a very quick clip to close with a couple more poems from Shapeshifter with Ann Caws, can we give one more round of applause to all three readers, Cole, Layla, and Yedda?
This is from Frida, as in Frida Kahlo, the person who invited them to Mexico. And they were very alike because of their wounded bodies. To Frida, the living woman, you held by your weight of eternity in the arms of your great nurse, earth nestled against her basalt face, sweating behind her eyelids, the greatest suffering, you stripped the leaf to its skeleton, you sowing in the sun the seed of nightly tears. You, whose soft hands, the softest mirrors of happiness, have no other side. You show the path which knocks with the sound of the miner lost in the mine, singing on the far side of hope. The tongue of the trees has licked your dress and your hair, and your voice in my ear is their bark against my cheek. You came farther off from love than the wheel, and clasped like the virgin diamond of lightning. You are the black swan swimming at night on a mountain lake in the crater, breast of nightly water where the fiery spring drinks in the morning behind the petrified screen of water. The colors begin to spin, strident fountains. The dead child's eyelids are pools of lilac, but the emerald throat bursts with joy. At 3 years of age, the crown is gold. In the depths of this room, in the depths of solitude's cries, 1939. Very moving, I think. Frida, to get permissions for this poem, you can't imagine. Frida, Frida la femme vivante. Toi, tenue de ton poids d'éternité, dans les bras de ta grande nourrice de terre, adossée à son visage de basalte, suant derrière ses paupières les plus grandes douleurs d'être, tu dépouilles la feuille jusqu'à son squelette. Toi, semant au soleil la graine des larmes nocturnes. Toi, dont les mains les plus doux miroirs d'allégresse n'ont pas d'envers. Tu montres au sentier qui cogne avec le bruit mineur perdu dans la mine, chantant au-delà de l'espoir. La langue des arbres a léché ta robe et tes cheveux, et ta voix à mon oreille, et leur écorce à ma joue. Tu es venu plus écarté d'amour que la roue, et serré comme le diamant vierge de foudre. Tu es le cygne noir nageant la nuit sur un lac de montagne dans le cratère, sein d'eau nocturne où s'abreuve la source du feu. Au matin derrière l'écran, pétrifié de cette eau commençant à gérer les couleurs stridentes fontaines, les paupières de l'enfant mort sur les étangs de lilas, mais le gosier d'émeraude éclate de joie. À 3 ans d'âge, la couronne est d'or. Au fond de cette chambre, au fond du cri des solitudes. 1939 is this poem. This poem is called Mélusine. It's not only the last poem in this volume, which I loved doing, but it's, to me, the most amazing poem about surrealism, and Lord, do I know a lot of poems about surrealism. This one is about Mélusine, that's a Celtic spirit. Of course, she's a spirit who is also a fish. She's a woman, she's a fish. She flies out the window on Saturday night to become a fish, flies back in to become a woman. Mélusine is the spirit of surrealism. Mélusine. I salute the invisible tree, the invisible shrub in the afternoon garden. The hummingbird traces with its flight the unmoving movement sunspots at the well's bottom, the bottomless well beneath the shadows. At dawn, Mélusine plucks the sun in her hands. The dawn flees like water. Mélusine, owe your cry to the sun stabbing you. You flee surrounded by your cry and the mirror of the love of men. Mélusine weeps for your reflection that will never return. Mélusine. Je salue l'arbre invisible, le buisson invisible au milieu du jardin l'après-midi, que le colibri dessine de son vol, les taches de soleil au fond du puits, le puits sans fond, au fond des ténèbres. À l'aube, Mélusine cueille le soleil dans ses mains, l'aube, comme de l'eau, s'enfuit. Et Mélusine, ô ton cri à ce soleil qui te poignarde, tu fuis enveloppé de ton cri, le cri de miroir de l'amour des hommes. Mélusine, pleure ton reflet qui ne reviendra plus. Thank you.